Hey everybody, this is my thoughts on Warframe as of May the 4th, 2014. So this may actually be a wildly different game by the time you're actually watching this video, who knows. From what I understand, they are constantly adding content, they're constantly changing things. So it may well be a wildly different game even 2 months down the line, who knows. But suffice to say, this is as it is currently. This is currently an open beta. It is a free-to-play game. It is developed by Digital Extremes, and if you're not familiar with Digital Extremes, then you should know them because they were one of the driving forces behind the Unreal Tournament games for a while. They helped out Epic with developing specifically Unreal Tournament 1. I believe they also helped them develop 2003 and 2004, but I'm not entirely sure on that. I believe they did, though. They've also made some other games on their own. I believe they made Pariah, which I never played that, but I haven't really heard all that many good things about it. And they also made this thing called Dark Sector, which is apparently what they had to make instead of Warframe. They really wanted to make Warframe, but they couldn't, and they had to make Dark Sector instead. And Dark Sector was not very well received. I haven't played that either. But this is apparently what Dark Sector was supposed to be, and what they really wanted to make, but isn't. It's a confusing situation, I know. But long story short, free-to-play game. It is a third-person shooter / third-person hack-and-slash game. You have a variety of playable warframes, which are the characters in the game. They're basically exosuits that enhance your abilities to do certain things. Like, for instance, the Mag has magnetic powers, and the Rhino is a straight-up tank that can harden their skin and make them incredibly resistant to damage and things like that. And each of them has their own set of abilities. Each Warframe has 4 abilities, and there are quite a lot of Warframes available. Some of them have Prime variants, and these extend to weapons as well, which are upgraded versions that have different polarity slots. I'll get to that in a minute. As well as just slightly improved powers. And with the Prime weapons, they just straight up do more damage and have better rates of fire and things like that than the standard versions. So you may be thinking already, well, this sounds like it's pay to win because it's a free-to-play game and you have all these things. And it's like, oh, well, the Prime version's better, so if you can buy that, then, well, guess what? This isn't a pay-to-win game. For one, it's co-op, not versus. So no matter what you're doing, you're not fighting against the other players. Even when you're actually doing what is technically the PvP stuff, which is Dark Sector conflicts, you're actually not directly playing against other players. You are playing against AI-controlled versions of those players. They are called Spectres. So at no point in this game is it directly pay to win. It's an entirely co-op game, up to 4 players. And where the monetization comes in is, sure, you can buy the various weapons and warframes and things like that, but everything you can buy with Platinum, except for cosmetic stuff, Platinum is the premium currency, by the way. Everything you can buy for Platinum, as long as it's not a cosmetic item, you can make in the game. Just straight up with the in-game currency that you earn by doing missions, with the resources you find for completing those missions and things like that. And the problem there is that you have to be patient because they can take up to 3 days, maybe longer. The longest I've had something take to make is 3 days, but usually it's about 12 to 24 hours. And that ranges from items, usually weapons, for instance, take 12 to 24 hours, while warframes themselves, once you've got all the parts together, the parts take 12 hours to build. Then you can take those parts and build the actual warframe, and that takes 3 days. So as long as you're patient, you can get pretty much anything that you can get with Platinum, but you can get it with in-game stuff. It's not that big of a deal. It's a pretty interesting way of doing it. You can also use Platinum to rush things, and so build them instantly as opposed to having to wait that time period. So the game kind of preys on the impatient, which personally that's not that big of a deal. I can be very patient when I want to be. So what's likely to happen, as long as you're patient, is you'll start to build something. You'll be like, okay, well, if that's building, I might as well go do something else. And so you'll go do something else, or maybe you'll continue leveling up your equipment. So there's, as long as you're patient, the game doesn't end up feeling like it's pushing you toward the buy stuff with platinum. Now, where you will actually be wanting platinum is in getting slots for your weapons and your warframes. Those do cost platinum, usually not that much, actually. A warframe slot costs 20 platinum, and you can get 2 weapon slots for 12 platinum, so that's 6 platinum per. To give you an idea, 75 platinum is $5. So it's a bit of an odd system where the platinum does seem rather expensive for what it is, but it does go quite a way. And there are ways, of course, of getting platinum at a reduced price. They do offer coupons with as login rewards. Sometimes you'll just get them for various events or things like that. Sometimes they'll have specials, and so obviously they're doing what they can to make it a profitable experience for them, but also not nickel and dime you for everything. And of course, you can also sell the stuff that you've got in game. So what you'll find is that people will actually pay platinum for particularly rare mods and rare parts to things. All of the primes, the prime weapons, the prime warframes and all that, all of those actually have to be built in-game. You can't buy those straight up. So there's an interesting market for prime parts, for prime blueprints, and that sort of thing. There's also, right now, as I'm making this video, there's a big market for the Tranquil Cleave stance for Nikanas, which is basically a katana. They introduced Nikanas in the previous update for all the melee stuff, and they only released that one style for them, and it's incredibly rare to spawn. So people will pay a premium for that, but you can generally find that people will pay you a few platinum per item, so it's actually possible to make money in the game off of the other players and things like that. And they do offer various specials to at least get you more interested in buying platinum and getting warframe slots and weapon slots and things like that. But I personally haven't spent any money in this game. It starts you out with 50 platinum, I believe. At least if I remember correctly, it's 50 platinum. And with that, I ended up getting weapon slots and warframe slots, and I was not wanting for quite some time. And right now, as I'm making this video, I'm in the process of making my 4th warframe. So it's an interesting game where the system for monetization seems to complement it fairly well, although it can seem expensive sometimes. Cosmetic items in particular are really expensive. So that's where they're really making their money. They're not making it off of the various rushing and things like that. Well, they are as well, but it's mostly off of the cosmetic items. So even if this thing was PvP, their monetization model still makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can buy the various weapons and such with platinum, but they're really expensive. So there's not as much of an incentive to buy those sorts of things. It's just more of an incentive to actually get it by making it. So now that I've talked for quite some time about the monetization and everything, how's the actual game? Well, it's really a pretty simple game, so that's why I've spent so long talking about monetization. Now, I'm not going to speak too much about graphics. It looks fine. It's got this very definite sci-fi feel to it. There's a lot of, with the Tenno themselves, the characters you're playing as, there's a lot of Asian styling going on. They're basically supposed to be styled like ninjas, but sci-fi ninjas. And then, of course, there's the Grineer, which seemed like there's something straight out of, say, Gears of War, for instance. They're one of the opposing factions. The other opposing factions are the Infested, which are basically these horrid creatures. And it really reminds you of things like the Aliens and things like that. And then there's the Corpus, which are the more technologically advanced one. They're the ones using robots and things like that. So there's a very definite sci-fi styling to it, but the graphics are, it's open beta. It's buggy. There's a lot of graphics glitches. It looks fine for the most part. Most of the animations are actually rather nice. It's definitely stylized, but again, there's a lot of issues with them, and that's just a result of it being technically incomplete. So I'm not really going to harp too much about the presentation. It suffices pretty well for the most part, as well as the sound design. There's not much in the way of music. The voice acting is pretty amateurish, but it's basically the people in the development studio actually doing the voices for the game, so you can't really expect too much out of that. And for what it's worth, they've done a fairly decent job with that, but it's, for what I can tell, it's pretty much placeholder at this point, so don't worry too much about it. The gameplay itself is up to 4 players in co-op, and you are all fighting against the environment. You are playing against hordes of enemies. There's a variety of objectives, from just eliminate all enemies in a given level to defend a position for various waves, with every 5 waves giving you a better and better, well, not necessarily better, but a different bonus. There's survival, which you have to replenish your life support by finding life support modules that enemies drop, as well as these life support capsules that are scattered throughout the level and just spawn in on occasion. And the life support goes down by 1% every second, so you do have to keep on your toes with that. There's just all sorts of different other objectives, like capturing enemies, boss fights at the end of various planets. And each of these is strung together by a series of levels. So what you're going to be finding is that it feels really grindy at first because the objectives are pretty samey. They're the very low-level areas, so you're already really underpowered. You've got the same enemies over and over and over again, that sort of thing. Once the game gets further in and it opens up and you get access to events and things like that, that's when the game gets a lot better. It gets more enjoyable the further you get in, but at the same time, it gets more grindy the further you get in. By that I mean you do have to do some grinding to get resources, to get credits, to be able to build things, and if you don't have friends playing with you, then it can be a real drag. I noticed that very early on, especially when I was starting out. I picked the Warframe that wasn't exactly the best suited for combat. It was the Mag. You get 3 at the beginning to choose from, and I chose the one it's got really cool powers once you get it leveled up, but at the start, it's incredibly wimpy. And you'll notice that. Once you get access to mods, which give you various passive bonuses, sometimes more active bonuses, but mostly passive bonuses, you get access to stance mods for melee weapons. You get access to better equipment because the starting equipment is pretty terrible. Once you get access to more of that, the game opens up, it becomes more fun. But, again, it feels really grindy at first. It can be really hard getting past those first few hours of grindiness where you're getting through the first 2 planets and you're still stuck with the starting gear. Once you get past that, I've found that it gets more enjoyable, but it can get really, really samey. So this is a game that's really best played with friends. But other than that, I had a pretty decent time with it so far. I'll probably play some more of it, certainly because I've got friends playing it, and we'll probably end up playing it together. But you'll find that when you get people to play with, and especially if they're better leveled than you, and they have access to the stuff further into the game, it gets a lot better because you level up fast, you get more access to stuff. But starting out, it can be a problem. I can see that. So, all in all, fairly fun so far. Looking forward to seeing more. Thanks for watching.